How you doing, guys, and welcome to the edition of ToolBox TV that almost didn't get made. I've just gotten away from 4 rambunctious kids, is the only way I could put it. Had a 16-month-old, an 18-month-old, a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old. And that was my lot today. I woke up this morning having realised that I had agreed for my wife to go away with her sister for a spa day, and I was going to take care of the kids for the day. Not a very good plan, but that was the state of play this morning. So after going to my eldest boy's school fete, we spent the rest of the day chasing around after the 16 and the 18-month-old and ending up completely exhausted. So if I look a little bit bedraggled, that will be why. But anyway, welcome to this week's episode of ToolBox TV. Many of you will know that yesterday we had our Toolbox Live, our workshop on selling, and one of the things that we talked about during the workshop was the whole aspect of following up, and following up after people have received their quotes. And again, it's it's a stark reminder that a lot of us in the trades, whether we're electricians or not, but a lot of us in the trades tend to write the quote, get the quote out there, put a lot of effort into preparing the quotes, and then don't follow up afterwards. We don't make any kind of contact with the customer afterwards. We sort of hope that they will come back to us, and when it happens, then we're lucky, and when it doesn't happen, we tend to just forget about it. We tend to just let life take over, and we carry on operating on the tools, and we move on and we prepare the next quote, and we do that quote, and that then sits on that pile that never gets followed up again. And it's interesting to think the number of times that we will go out and do a quote for a job and not get the job and not follow up on it, against the number of jobs that we do actually get, and the effort and time that goes into putting those quotes together, and they're wasted. Now, are you going to get every single quote that you do, even if you follow up? No, you're not. But what you can get is a lot of valuable information. Because if they didn't choose you for some reason, if you follow up, you're likely to get some feedback at least. The feedback may be, you're too expensive. Well, in my language, too expensive doesn't mean that you charge too much. It means you didn't show them the value. So next time you do a quote, you can show them the value. You can show them, you can demonstrate more the value of what it is that you provide. When somebody says to you, it's too expensive, we went with the next cheapest quote, or whatever the story is, it's not necessarily that you're charging too much. We all have a level that we charge. We all have what we believe is our worth. And I don't think we should move away from that. I don't think we should discount that. I don't think that we should bend the rules to accommodate people who think we're too expensive. If you know your worth and you supply value and you deliver the service to the value and the belief system that you hold in terms of the worth that you need to charge, then don't be embarrassed about what you charge, and don't be bullied into reducing your costs. But that's, as I said, it's another whole soapbox that I get onto. But the point is, if somebody gives you that as an excuse, in my book, you just haven't demonstrated the value to them. You just haven't shown them that you are the expert, that you are more valuable than the next guy. To them, they're commoditizing, and they're looking at a couple of sockets on a wall, or a consumer unit in a wall, or a rewire. They're looking at the commodity. They're not looking at the value that comes in behind that. But that's a whole other issue. What we were going to talk about, what I am going to talk about in this video, is about the whole aspect of follow-up, and how by not following up, we're not getting that feedback and that information that can help us develop on our approach, our sales approach, our quotes, our delivery, but also we're leaving on the table people who have just been sitting on the fence. And I know from experience myself that there are people who will come back to you 3, 6, 8 months down the line and say, oh, we're ready to go ahead with that work now. Is the quote still valid, or do you need to re-quote? And there's also people who, where I have called to follow up that it's pushed them over the edge. They've sat on the fence maybe with 2 or 3 different quotes that there's probably not a gnat's whisker between in terms of cost and in terms of appearance, and they're sitting on the fence and they're trying to juggle and think who. But because I made that phone call, because I sent that email, because I made that contact, they make the decision in my favour. So these are all good reasons why you shouldn't just do a quote, post it out and then forget about it. You know, if you haven't heard back, then follow up. And we spoke yesterday at ToolBox Live about the different methods, the different ways that people can use to follow up, the things that you can do to follow up. And among them were writing to people, so snail mail. Now, not very many people use snail mail these days, so that makes it a good tactic in a sense, because if they receive a nice written typed reminder from you with a handwritten envelope to say, you know, our quote was sent out last week, or our quote was sent out 3 days ago, I haven't heard back from you, could you just give us a call and let us know where you stand. It's another touch. It's an opportunity again to get you in front of the customer, but also it may just jolt them your direction because they think he cares. You know, this guy gives us stuff. He's interested in my project and he's interested in us. So it may be that nudge that you need. The other method we talked about is the telephone. Not enough people use the telephone these days. I think we've all either become shy or embarrassed. We're happy to use the phone when we're taking the details to go and do the quotes, but we're not so happy to use it as a follow-up tool. We're not so happy to pick up the phone and say, did you receive the quote? Are you happy with everything? Is there any questions or is there any queries? And we know that, you know, across the pond, the Americans are much better at that. They would stay on the phone all day selling and talking to people. But we in the UK, we tend to shy away from that. We tend to almost be embarrassed about asking for the job, and we shouldn't be. You know, you should be able to ask for the job. If you're confident that you're the best person to do that job, if you're confident that you're charging the right money for that job, then you shouldn't be afraid to pick up the phone and say to the person, have you received the quote? Are we ready to go? Or whatever phrase or wording you want to use. I'm not a great believer in using scripts, be yourself. But there's an opportunity to talk to the person and find out if there's any queries. You know, they may be sitting, as I said, with 2 or 3 quotes, and there's not a gnat's whisker between these quotes. And it could be one question that might just tilt it in your favour, or even just the very fact that you've picked up the phone and had that conversation. The other thing, you know, again, if it's a high value or high worth job, something that's really worth your while, then visit them. You know, go and knock on the door. You know, if a job is worth £6,000, £7,000, £8,000 to you, then it's worth, you know, driving out of your way, a short way to go and knock on the door. Okay, you don't tell them you've driven out of the way. You can simply knock on the door and say, look, I was passing, I recognised the address, and I thought I'll just pop in and find out if you've made a decision on the quote yet, or if you've received it, or if you had any queries, if there's anything I can help you with while I'm here, while I'm in the area. A quick visit, just a quick knock on the door, and say, as I said, I was just in the area, just passing by, realised this is where I was when I sent the quote. It's in my head, I thought I'd pop in and just have a word with you, see how you're getting on. Is there anything I can help you with? And it may be that little thing that just kicks them over the edge. You know, and again, people are afraid that they're going to cheese off the client. People are afraid that they are going to lose the customer because of that. And to that, I say, you know, at the end of the day, if you're going to lose them, you're going to lose them anyway. So why not lose them on your terms? Why not lose them on your schedule, if you like, or by doing things that you want to do? If they're not going to decide in your favour, then does it matter that you knock on their door? Does it matter that you phone them? Does it matter that you send them a letter? It doesn't, because they're not going to be your customer, they're not going to be your ideal customer. But if by doing that, if by taking action, and if by making that phone call, if by knocking on that door, if by sending that letter, it actually brings them over to you, then you've started a relationship, and you've started off showing them that you actually care enough to keep in contact, and it's not just another job, it's not just a system that you run in terms of getting quotes out, and after you've got the quote out you're not interested unless you actually get the job itself. Now my favourite methods is of course email, because with email you can automate the whole process, and many of you will have already heard me talking about the fact that I use Aweber. I take my I almost said PDA, that would be showing my age, but I take my iPhone to site with me, and on the iPhone I can actually input the customer's details. So I'll tell them, you know, if I take your email address now, I can send you the quote a lot quicker. The email address goes in front of them on site, so that's permission-based email marketing, and instantly then my pre-quote email is sent to them, to their email address, and then they're in a follow-up sequence, and that follow-up sequence can be interrupted at any point. So in other words, 3 days after I've been to visit the property, they will have already received the quote, because the quote will go out the next day. When I come back, the details are given to Helen. Helen types up the quote gets sent out. So 3 days later, they will receive an email saying, hope you received the quote okay, please don't forget to let us know one way or the other, blah, 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 blah. A couple of days later, another email will go out saying something along the lines of, you received your quote 6 days ago, whatever, we haven't heard back from you. So, could you please contact us to let us know, blah, blah. And I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the wording. All of this was set up quite some time ago in Aweber. But the bottom line is that sequence of emails will go on and on and on until such time as I get a response. And if I get a response where they are a buyer and they become a customer, then they go into a separate chain of emails where they get various emails welcoming them on board as customers, and we're glad to get their work, and so on and so on. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but a series of emails, and you can put as many as you want into that. And of course, if the answer is no, we aren't interested, we're not buying, then they go into another list, because we don't forget about them. We don't just say, oh, they've become a customer now, so forget about them completely. But they'll go into a completely different email campaign. And that will, you know, sorry, we couldn't meet your needs on this occasion, perhaps you'll consider us again in the future, and so on and so forth. And then they'll continue to receive a series of emails based on that. And then what happens is eventually those two trains come together into what I call my generic series of emails. And that's a series of emails that just puts out some informative tidbits every now and again that keep them, it's not selling, it's informational that just keeps them, keeps my name on top of their tongue, whether they've bought or whether they haven't bought. As I said, these email series come together. I can also then, if I have promotions that I'm doing, or if I want to do a particular marketing strategy around a date on my marketing calendar, whether it's Easter or Valentine's Day or whatever's coming up, that I can actually broadcast emails to those people in those lists. And once they go into Aweber once, everything from there is automatic, because it's all just based on a series of rules. So if they buy, we input them into the buy database, and it automatically takes them out of the other database. So that's what I mean by it can be interrupted at any time, because then that series of emails stops and this series of emails begins. And the same is true for the other side. If they don't buy, if we put them into this, the response was no database, then they get this series of emails and this one stops at whatever point. So if they've gone through 3-4 emails in this series, and there's 7 emails in there, well, it will stop at the third or fourth one, whichever one that they stopped on, and they won't receive 5, 6, 7, and they'll start getting 1, 2, 3 on this column. And as I said, it's based on a series of rules that you set up in Aweber. Now, I'm saying Aweber because that's what I use, but most of these autoresponders will allow you to set your system up in exactly the same way. And that's why doing it via email, doing the follow-up sequence via email, is my favourite way to do it, because it is a bit like you can forget about it. You send a quote out, the details are into the database, and you really don't have to worry about it. But yet the person is getting follow-up emails from you that look like you're sending the emails, because it will have their details in it. You know, it will say, "Dear Mrs. Smith, pleased to have visited your property at da-da-da-da and provided you a quote for da-da-da-da." You know, you can set up the database to have as much or as little information as you want, and then you preload a series of emails with key terms in it so that that information gets transferred onto the email. But you know, it can be as in-depth or as loose as you want it to be. The bottom line is, find a method that works for you. As I say, I favour the email one, and I recommend doing it via email. But all of the other methods will work as well. Simply sending a letter, simply picking up the telephone, simply knocking on somebody's door. The bottom line is, follow up your quotes, because I guarantee you that the ones that are sitting left on the table, there will be a number of them who just need a nudge. There'll be a number of them, like the ones I mentioned previously, who come back to you 6, 7, 8 months later and say, is that quote still valid? Well, think about how many of those who have already binned the quotes and then decide they want to go ahead with the work. I mean, after all, if they've gotten the quotes, there's some interest in doing the work. Now, you know, one of three things happen. Either they postpone the work, they book you to do the work, or they book somebody else to do the work. And at least by making a phone call and following up, or sending an email and following up, or sending a letter and following up, you know where you stand. You know, if they turn around and say, we've booked somebody else, well, now you know where you stand. You put them into the other database, they start getting a different series of emails, or however you want to handle it in your business, but you know where you stand. And if they come back to you and say, we haven't made a decision yet, we're postponing things, it may be 3 or 4 or 5 months beforehand, you then have the option to say, well, you know what, my quote will still stand, or I may have to re-quote, whatever the case is. But you open a door allowing you to maintain contact with them. So that's my whole take on following up, and I think you should, rather than just forget about it, and we all do, we get out on the tools, we move on, we're doing the daily grind, and we forget to follow up all of those quotes. I bet you now, if you look back at your database, you have a collection of quotes that you did, that you've forgotten you've forgotten that you've done, and you have never heard back from the customer. Do yourself a favour, pick up the phone and call a few of those. Send out a couple of emails to a few of those ones that are sitting in your database now that are probably 3 months old, if not longer. And I bet you'll get results. And when you do, put the comments below the video so that we can all share. Until the next time, continue to learn and grow, and I'll see you in the next video.